Hello, 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 and welcome to the Radiant Rebirth Online Retreat, where we are igniting our age of empowerment, owning who we truly are, gaining clarity of direction so that we can take that soul-aligned action with joy, grace, and ease. Today, I have the immense pleasure of being joined by Melissa Amos. Melissa is a spiritual psychotherapist, a Reiki master, a soul mentor, and an author. I was going to say coach, well, coach as well, and author, who helps her clients to discover their soul's calling and find their path to freedom, aligned action, and unshakable inner peace. Melissa, it's such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for joining the call.
My pleasure is all mine.
Oh, and I'm really, really, really excited about our topic today. Many of our audience members will have heard of the Akashic Records, but you're really bringing a new perspective and a new outlook on how to use the Akashic Records in modern times. So we're going to be talking about the Akashic Records in the now, the pathway to your purpose. So, would you like to explain a little bit more about what that means and why it's relevant to our women over 50 heading into their age of empowerment?
Well, why don't we begin with what the Akashic Records are, because they sound all mystical and magical, and there's a lot of information out there. But for me, essentially, they are the library of your soul. So if you think of the fact that our soul has had a journey, so through this life and maybe even through lives beyond, that we have been through an immense amount of experiences. And this library contains everything that we have ever thought, been, done, had, experiences, all the talents that we have acquired, all of the, the traumas and the restrictions that we faced over the time. And for me, when I discovered the Akashic Records, I realized the depth that we have, not just as a human in this life, but as a soul that is living this human life. And, for me, when I first began, I started to do what I think most people do in the records, and they go backwards, and we look to find out who we were, and we want to discover, was I the Queen of Sheba, or was I a Victorian queen or princess, or was I a master or a slave in the Egyptian times? And that is absolutely fascinating. But the more I discovered, the more I worked in the records, and the more that I worked with my clients in the records, is that there's such a relevance to now and who we are and who we have become, and maybe even more importantly, who we are becoming in the future.
Mm, I love that. And how do you move forward? How do you tap into the records in the now? So I understand sort of looking backwards, but how are we doing that in the here and now?
So, if you think about what I said, that the Akashic Records are this library that contains everything that we've ever thought, said, did, been, done, had, which is wonderful. And you can think of it as this library that when you've had a thought has created like a line
Mm,
in the records. It's like, I've had a thought, this is a line. When that thought then is quite emotive, if there's an emotion that sits behind that thought, so like an emotional thought, like, oh, like I really enjoyed that, or oh, that was really scary, then that thought has more weight in it. So we can think of it that the library or the book has now created a paragraph or a page, or maybe even a chapter. When we take action on that thought, on that emotion, well, now we've got a whole chapter slash volume of a book. Because this, if you think about a thought, it's quite kind of wispy. A thought can come and it can go. We think about an emotion, there's something more tangible to it. And when we have an emotional thought, so especially there's kind of scary ones, or the ones that we might deem as negative, we think about it again and again and again. Yes. We talk about it. We tell our friends, oh, this happened. It was awful, all of the things. And now we've got what was just one thing or one incident or one thought as creating a more weight in our books. now when I take action on it, okay, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to study this, I'm going to become this, I'm going to, whatever it is. Well, now, like, I've actually got a series of sequences. And this is true going backwards. And what we'll often find that if we do decide to go into our records, that there will be certain actions that have more weight on how we are now. Yes. And
Mm,
we can think about that with our childhood. Something happened, or something happened 10 years ago, and that actually we can see the direct correlation to now. So that all makes sense. And I think that's quite accepted.
yes.
Now, if we think about that as true, which I believe it is, that must mean that in every moment we are writing our records.
Mm.
In every moment of every day, there is something being scored in this great book that we call our life. And it's the same process. If I have a thought about something, I'm going to write a nice little line in there.
Mm.
If I put emotion behind that thought, I've got a paragraph. If I take action on that thought, now I've got a page. Now I've got something substantial. I've got a bit of a backstory. I've got something that I'm going to do. And when I thought about that, when I had that download, that aha moment, it made me understand, well, what is it that I'm doing in every moment of every day that is actually creating this now moment, that's actually creating this record, which then inevitably is creating my next step and my next step and my next step, and therefore my whole dharma, karma, purpose, all the things.
I love this. I love this so much because really what you're talking about is being a conscious creator, being a conscious
Exactly.
creator in every moment.
Yeah.
And really setting up your future by what you choose right now in this
Right.
moment. So when people are listening to this and they're thinking, what did I say? What did I do? Oh my gosh, what am
Yeah.
I setting into action?
Yeah.
Is there a way of not erasing
Yeah.
the records, but is there a way of course correcting?
Yeah.
You're aware that you're consciously creating in every single moment by your thoughts, by your actions. Is there a way to kind of course correct to say, actually, I want to create a better now that creates a better future?
Yes. There's a few ways that we can tackle this, because our thoughts don't just come from nowhere. Our thoughts come from somewhere. They seem to randomly appear. And actually, I do believe that our thoughts come from this field that surround us, which our Akashic records are contained in this field. So what causes me to have a thought? Well, that might have been all of the past experiences. And
Mhm.
so I am more weighted, or I am more prone to having certain, intrusive thoughts come in, or certain positive thoughts come in. And this is like a conditioning, a programming that all sits in what we might know as our subconscious mind.
Mhm.
And they just come up seemingly out of nowhere. So if we find that we are constantly having the same destructive repetitive thought patterns, which are the ones really that we want to start to unravel, well, there's different ways we can do it. We can go back, which we often do through counseling, through therapy, through past life regressions, through Akashic records readings. We can go back and we can discover what happened, so that we nip it in the bud, and we're like, okay, well, I understand that the reason that I am afraid of water, for example, is because way back then this happened, and now I know that not to be true. And then we settle our nervous systems, we rewrite how we feel about it, if you like. And then that's naturally going to have a knock-on effect in the now, because now I'm not going to be running from that state of fear.
Yeah,
Yeah. The only reason I'm afraid of water is something happened. And now, rather than acting from my state of power, my state of purpose, my state of hero, I'm acting from my state of fear, because quite frankly, we want to live, right? And I have an experience here in my field that's telling me this isn't safe.
yeah,
So that's the really effective way. If you really want to go deep and you want to do things, we can go nip it in the bud, create a cascade effect into the now. Um, which is all very well, but if we're sitting in there and we're like, oh my God, I've just had a thought and now everything and it's all tumbling down. For me, what really helps is really coming back into the moment. It's coming back into the now and going, okay, so this thing happened, whatever it was that's causing you to have this thought, to have this, negative thought pattern, to have this emotional cascade going on, happened. I accept it. It happened, it happened, it happened. Now, how much do I want that to weigh onto my future? How, like, and genuinely, by understanding that the thought creates a line, that the emotion creates the paragraph, and the action takes the page, how many times am I going to tell all my friends about the thing that happened? Because every time I tell my friends, I'm rewriting that story. How many times am I going to complain about what happened? Every time I complain, I'm going to be rewriting the story. How many times am I going to keep on going back into that loop and that cycle? Or is there a better feeling thought?
Mm.
Now, I'm not talking about bypassing the thing, because I think there's always time to go back and to do the work and to release it from our body, and to bring the healing and the understanding around it. But in the moment, is there a better feeling thought? Is there something that I can think or do or say or know or experience that's going to feel one better than where I am now? Is there a positive spin that I can put on this? So, for example, you're going through a really hard time. I can keep, telling the friends and doing all of thing, and scoring that more in my records. Or maybe I can say to myself, okay, what's the lesson in this?
Mhm.
What am I learning from this? How am I growing from this? How is my soul getting stronger from this? What's on the other side of this? When I get through this, what is that going to then mean about me? And so what we're starting to do is to bring our focus, our minds, we're getting our ego in, our brain into a space of problem solving rather than problem rehashing. And we are coming into really what's being written in our records, something that is going to be more conducive into moving forward into the space that we want to be and want to become.
I love that. Problem solving versus problem rehashing.
Yeah.
Problem solving versus problem rehashing. And there's so much just conscious awareness of what you're doing. And am I repeating those same
Yeah.
stories? Because I know that if I repeat the same stories, I'm actually creating more pages and volumes and grooves. How do we, and it's wonderful. I know we can sort of say this, but sometimes it's hard in practice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you work with clients to kind of help them to stay focused on the now? Are there practices that you have that keep your clients coming back to the now to understand what they're doing in any given moment?
I think often the concept, and just having that concept of the records being something that are always there and always being written, can just be really helpful on its own. Like for me, that was a game changer when I feel myself spiraling in. That is a game changer. The reality is that when we're going into these emotional tumbles that we all do from time to time, it can be overwhelming, and so it's very hard to just snap out of it. Like we can't snap out of it. And so sometimes it is the questions that we're asking ourselves,
Mhm.
like what's on the other side of this. Like for me, that's a very powerful question. What's on the other side of this? Because then we begin to create our imagination, which the records doesn't know it's our imagination. The record's just taking our thoughts as our thoughts as our thoughts. So it's writing it down. So it's now coming into future focus. That's super helpful. In the moment when the emotions are all going wild, my favorite practice is to do some form of tapping. So like EFT therapy, or even just kind of something like this is really easy. Or just kind of tapping on what's known as the gamut spot. You can just tap here, or like the reverse energy spot, just something. So it's getting me back in my body, or a nice breathing practice that's getting me back in the body. This reminder that I am safe. There is no emotional danger. And this is one of those quick fixes for me. If you just take a deep breath, if everyone who's listening wants to do this now, I love doing this. Just take a deep breath in And as you breathe out, just make a sound like this, tss, like a tire hissing.
Yeah.
Right, you can feel that like straight away. You come in the body, it settles it down. Your vagus nerve is like, okay, I'm safe because I wouldn't be doing this if I was running away from a tiger. Brings me back in the moment. And then, okay, what's on the other side of this? Where
Mm,
am I moving from this? Or even what resources do I have that can help me get through this? Right? You're just asking your brain a different question. And whether you think this is the Akashic records, your psyche, your unconscious, or whatever it is, will begin to deliver to you the resources that you need to help you move on. Because every single one of us here, every single one of us listening to this has been through any situation that they've put themselves in. They've got themselves here. Nothing has taken them. So they know that they have everything that they need in order to get to the other side of it.
and I thank you. And I love that question. What's on the other side of this? And by this, do you mean the challenge? So what's
Yep.
on the other side of the challenge, right? So what's on the other side of this? And I love the sort of nervous system regulation exercise. I think that's really important to kind of bring you back into the now. So are the Akashic records something that people can access for themselves, or do they need a practitioner to do that? How does that work?
There are definitely meditations and visualizations that you can do to help you access them under the guidance of somebody. I did learn how to access my own, and that is actually quite simple. It's something that I teach through my programs in of how to go in. Truth for me is we are accessing our records every single day.
Mm,
As I said, every time we have a thought, we're writing them. But where do our thoughts come from?
mm,
They've got to come from a field, and I think they can come from all sorts of places, but those dominant thoughts, those ones that are repeating, that thing when you really feel the call to come and do something,
mm.
and that kind of like that depth. For me, my discovery is that at least in part, these are your Akashic records speaking to you. So you're accessing them because we are tapping into something beyond our brain, something beyond our situations that are around us. And we often use this in our language, like it came from somewhere really deep in me.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Like, for me, that's coming from this space that knows me from a soul level. And the Akashic Records knows you from a soul level. It is literally the journey of your soul from way back to inception all the way to infinity.
Wow. Wow. So it's kind of like the soul's sort of map or sort of, yeah, just map of existence.
Right.
And so once you work with clients and you've taught them, this kind of way of being that they're consciously creating in every moment, they're constantly writing in their records, and they then have this switch to say, I have a choice about how I think and feel and what I do. What happens in your experience when they start doing this? Like, what happens afterwards as a result?
That's a great question. Because for me it was unbelievable. Like, I didn't know about the Akashic records. I found out about the Akashic records, and suddenly I'm like, whoa, my soul is on a journey.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just here in this lifetime, and I don't just know, I was like early 30s when I discovered the Akashic records. I'm like, I've not just had these 30 years of life, I have had lives beyond this, which means that I've had skills that I have gathered beyond this, which means that I have had experiences that I've had beyond this, which means I know more than I think I know, which is maybe why sometimes I pick something up and it's super easy, and you're like, it's like I've done this before. What it did for me, it took a while, but that imposter syndrome thing that so many of us have faced, who am I to do this? the question turned into, when I discovered what my past lives were, and I see this with my clients over and over again, when we discover like this journey that's taken me to here, is rather than who am I to do this, it's like, who am I not to do this? Like,
Beautiful.
this is literally why I'm here. And I've been working lifetimes to get up to this point. So now what? Now what am I creating? Now how am I living that? Now how am I taking all of this? And I've managed to get, you know, the listeners of this, so like 50, 55, 60, 70, 80, 90 years of this earth. Like, I'm not going to waste this, because I have this unique essence, which speaks to me by my joy. It speaks to me by my passion. It speaks to me by that thing that I can just talk about over and over and over again. That thing that like I see other people do and I think, oh, I really want to do that. Those things are your soul's calling. And I think it's our duty as, you know, awakened beings, people who are, you know, becoming more conscious, to actually take that and activate it. And that is life changing. There's no going back from there.
Wow. I love that it talks to you through your joy, through your excitement, what you talk about, through your passion. And so often, I think, you know, we find something that just completely lights us up. And it really kind of gives us that nudge that we should do something. But we talk ourselves out of it
We do.
because of, you know, other responsibilities, excuse me, or you know, what will people think? And there's that internal, external judgment or what have you. What do you say to clients to get them to really trust that joy, that passion, the thing that they can talk about over and over about, the thing that they're really excited about? How do you get them to stay in the energy of that joy and then follow that through with action because they might not trust it?
Well, let's just acknowledge that it is very hard to trust it, because we've probably spent the first half of our life being told not to trust it. You know, follow your head, not your heart. This is the sensible thing to do. Go get the job, go work in the thing, have the career, all of this stuff. But there's been something that whole time that has been telling you this isn't right. That low level anxiety, that feeling of, you know, there must be more to life like this, the Monday morning feeling that everyone talks about. I do not get a Monday morning feeling. Monday morning, I'm like, yes, what are we doing today? Who are we helping? How are we going? What are we doing? Right. So your soul's been talking to you this whole time. When we start to become more conscious that there are these different aspects of us, that we have got this soul purpose, that we are moving towards things, for me, I started to understand that there was kind of two drivers. Yeah. There's the driver of fear, which is our safety mechanism. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he's like, hey, first thing you need to do is make sure you're safe. And your fear, your ego mind, yeah, even your instincts have that's their job. Keep you safe, keep you alive, keep you well. It's brilliant. But once we are alive and well, now we have a choice. Now we are like, okay, am I going to allow myself to be driven more by my fear, or to driven more by my purpose? It's like my hero or my ego, because your ego will sit in the fear aspect because it wants to keep you safe. It wants to be alive. The ego doesn't know the eternal nature of us, whereas the soul does. And so what I teach my clients is the ability to differentiate between those different voices or those different parts of us, and to give it space and time. What does my body want to say? What does my brain want to say? What does my soul want to say? And start to get a bigger picture of, you know, of what guidance is coming in for
Mhm.
us. And then once we've got that, then we make a choice. Well, is it that my fear needs to be satisfied now? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes that, you know, or the body needs to be satisfied, or the brain needs to be satisfied. But the more you learn to trust it, so the more you learn to take that often illogical, but that je ne sais quoi kind of thing, and you realize the opportunity that that then brings you. You realize then the next step it's going to take you in. Well, then the more you trust it.
Mhm.
So there's two steps. One, understand that there's more than one thing guiding you. Number two is, how do I differentiate between them and understand which one's which? And number three is the choice of which one am I going to actually listen to.
Hmm. I love that. So there's more than one thing speaking to us.
Yeah,
Understanding how to discern and differentiate sort of where
yeah.
that's coming from, and then choosing,
And then choosing.
and I love that, it's not presented as this thing that, happens to us.
No,
Even though we are getting this inspiration, we still get the opportunity to choose.
right.
And so yes, we're creating in every single moment. And I love how you've brought everything into the here and now to really empower
Hmm.
your clients and people who will be listening to this recording. I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared. So if people want to get in contact with you, if they want to find out more, how do they do that?
I spend probably way too much time on social media. You can find me on Facebook, is my main home, which is at the Melissa Amos. But if you type that into any of the platforms, YouTube, Instagram, you'll find me at the Melissa Amos. There's also my website, melissa-amos.com, and there's a free gift I'd love to offer you all, which will really help you with that fear versus purpose thing. I've recorded this hypnotherapeutic meditation that helps you unlock that fear, understand what it is, and then rewire it so that we aren't so driven by that, which many of us are, and we're more driven by the courage, the breakthrough, the soul.
Mm.
And I've also put with that an accompanying mini workbook with just some journaling prompts just to really help you uncover that. Listen to that a few times, and you'll just see how you just start to make those decisions a little easier.
Amazing, amazing. And yes, please download this. Please do it. Melissa is super talented, and I'm so, so grateful, Melissa, for you being here this evening and for sharing all of this wisdom and really practical tools that will help people in the here and now break through to that sense of freedom and soul purpose. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. My pleasure.